All right, so let's dive into this Elon Musk thing, his security clearance. It's been all over the news.
Oh yeah, it's definitely been making the rounds.
It seems like everyone's talking about it,
Yeah.
and for good reason, I mean. We're talking about access to information, like top secret stuff, the kind of information that makes Area 51 look like a public library,
Yeah.
you know?
Right, exactly.
And the big question everyone seems to be asking is, why does Elon Musk, with all his, headlines and antics and everything, still have this kind of access?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, think about it. While elected officials don't need these formal clearances, a lot of other people working with the government do.
Oh, racing.
Scientists, engineers, even contractors at companies like SpaceX.
Hmm.
They all need it. They all handle information that's crucial to national security.
So it's not just like anyone can get their hands on this stuff.
No, not at all. It's a
Yeah.
pretty big deal.
Which is why this whole Elon Musk thing is so fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about a guy who openly talks about experimenting with psychedelics.
Yeah.
Chats with Putin,
Yeah.
and seems to just live his life
Yeah.
on his own terms. And yet, he still holds the keys to some pretty sensitive kingdoms. So how does that work?
Yeah. It is kind of a head scratcher, isn't it? To understand the puzzle, I guess you have to understand the process. Getting a security clearance isn't just a simple background check. It's a deep dive into your entire life.
Oh, wow. So they really
Yeah,
get into
that's-
everything.
Finances, relationships, even those late-night poker games, it all gets scrutinized.
Hold on, poker games.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Absolutely. They're looking for any signs of financial instability, potential for blackmail, anything that could compromise your trustworthiness,
Yeah.
Can you handle sensitive information even under pressure? That's what they want to know.
I see.
And the no lying policy, it's not a suggestion, it's a golden rule.
So even a little white lie to your spouse could come back to haunt you?
You bet. And there are different levels of clearance, too. The highest level, the one dealing with critical nuclear weapons design information. That one involves years of background checks, interviews with practically everyone you've ever met. Yeah. It's the gold standard of scrutiny.
That's intense. So even after all that,
Yeah.
you're not off the hook, right? They keep tabs on you.
Oh, yeah, constantly. Refresher courses, reinvestigations, and something called insider threat training.
Insider threat training.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. They basically teach you to spot red flags in your colleagues, financial troubles, emotional instability, substance abuse, all potential signs of risk.
Oh, wow. So they're really looking for anything that could cause a problem.
Exactly.
So let's bring this back to Elon Musk then. Based on what we've read, he seems to be ticking a few of those insider threat boxes, doesn't he?
Well, that's where the paradox lies. On paper, his actions definitely raise some concerns. Take the infamous Joe Rogan podcast incident, for example, where he smoked marijuana on air. Even casual drug use is a huge red flag for anyone with a clearance.
Right. And then there's that Wall Street Journal report alleging his use of other substances too, like LSD, cocaine, and ecstasy,
Well,
often at these private parties.
yeah, I read that one.
His attorney denied the report, but even the rumors would be a problem for most people with high-level clearance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's the whole thing with Hiskimi, his reported communications with Vladimir Putin.
Oh, right.
The Wall Street Journal reported that Musk and Putin have been in contact multiple times, discussing everything from personal matters to geopolitics. There was even a report that Putin asked him to avoid activating Starlink over Taiwan.
Yeah, that definitely raised some eyebrows.
It did. Now, having friends in Russia isn't inherently a problem. But when you're regularly communicating with a world leader like Putin, and you have access to classified information, well, it definitely raises questions. And it's gotten the attention of some pretty important people, like NASA Administrator Bill Nelson. He called for an investigation into Musk's alleged Russian contacts.
Yeah, he did. And then we have to consider Musk's history of questionable judgment, too. Like that $20 million fine he had to pay for those misleading tweets about taking Tesla private. Makes you wonder, if he can be so careless with public statements, how carefully is he handling classified information?
It's mind-boggling.
Uh-huh.
So if all this is true, and it's causing such a stir, why does he still have security clearance? What's the logic here?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's a question we'll continue to explore in part 2 of this deep dive. Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about Elon Musk and his security clearance, trying to figure out why he still has it despite all the red flags.
Right. It's like there's this unspoken rule. Like if you're innovative enough, maybe the rules don't apply so strictly. Is it possible that we're seeing this too big to fail situation play out here?
That's definitely one of the theories floating around. The argument is that Elon Musk is just so crucial to American innovation, particularly with SpaceX and its role in space exploration and national security, that the potential risks are just outweighed by the benefits of his continued access.
So it's like saying, sure, he might be a little unpredictable, but look at all the amazing things he's doing for our country.
Exactly. There was this opinion piece in Government Executive that suggested this might be the case. It highlighted this potential double standard, where individuals like Musk are given more leeway than your average government employee.
Which I mean, that raises some serious questions about fairness and the integrity of the whole system. What kind of message does that send to the people who follow every single rule, disclose every foreign contact, jump through every hoop to maintain their clearance?
It's a really valid point. I mean, Tom Nichols in his Atlantic article raised that same concern. He questioned at what point erratic behavior and risky associations become too much for any administration to tolerate, regardless of the individual's contributions.
So we're stuck in this ethical tug-of-war then, between rewarding innovation and upholding the standards that are supposed to protect our national security.
It seems that way.
And it makes you wonder, has this kind of thing happened before?
Oh, definitely. It's not a new tension. Remember J. Robert Oppenheimer, the brilliant physicist who led the Manhattan Project?
Oh yeah, the father of the atomic bomb?
That's the one. Despite his monumental contribution to national security, Oppenheimer's security clearance was actually revoked in the 1950s.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
Due to concerns about his past communist affiliations and perceived security risks.
So even a scientific genius, who helped develop the most powerful weapon in history, wasn't immune to the consequences of potential security risks.
Exactly. It shows that even in extraordinary circumstances, the government has historically taken security clearance very seriously.
So that makes you think, if Oppenheimer wasn't too big to fail, why does Elon Musk seem to be getting a different treatment?
It's a good question, one we might not have the answer to.
It is a head-scratcher for sure. But okay, let's play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say the government is willing to overlook these potential issues with Musk. What are the possible consequences then? What's the worst-case scenario?
Well, if you start with the alleged drug use, if Musk is actually using hard drugs, it could make him vulnerable to blackmail or coercion by foreign intelligence agencies. Yeah, think about it. The leverage they would have if they threaten to expose his activities.
And we're not just talking about personal embarrassment here, right? He has access to sensitive information about SpaceX's technology, government contracts, potentially even classified information related to national security.
Exactly. And then you add in the reports of his conversations with Putin. If those conversations involved any discussion of sensitive information, it could raise serious concerns about foreign influence, maybe even espionage.
Especially with his history of impulsive behavior on social media. Like, remember that $20 million fine he had to pay for those misleading tweets about taking Tesla private? It just makes you wonder if he applies that same lack of judgment to his handling of classified information.
It's definitely a troubling thought. And beyond the direct risks of leaks or espionage, there's also the issue of public trust. If it comes out that Musk has been given a pass on security clearance procedures, it could really damage public confidence in the government's ability to protect sensitive information.
And it kind of feels like a slap in the face to all the people who followed the rules, who allowed the government to scrutinize their lives, who made sacrifices to maintain their clearance.
That's exactly the point Tom Nichols made in his article. He argued that this perceived double standard could be a slap in the face to all the conscientious public servants who've meticulously followed the rules. It breeds cynicism and erodes trust in the system.
So it's like Prava. There's one set of rules for the average person.
Yeah.
And another set for the Elon Musks of the world.
It seems that way.
And this isn't even an isolated incident, right?
You're right. The Trump administration faced significant scrutiny over its handling of security clearances, too. There were reports of individuals with questionable backgrounds being granted access to sensitive information, which raised concerns about political favoritism and disregard for established protocols.
Right. The article even mentioned that some of the people around Trump probably shouldn't have been allowed to open a checking account, let alone access classified information.
It's a concerning picture. And there are fears that if Trump is reelected, the security clearance process could be further politicized or even bypassed entirely, leading to even greater risks.
So where does this leave us? What does all this mean for the future of security clearance? Are we going to see more cases like Elon Musk's? Will the criteria become more flexible to accommodate innovation, or will we see a tightening of the reins?
It's tough to say. It's difficult to predict the future. But this case has definitely highlighted the complexities and challenges of balancing individual freedom, innovation, and national security in the 21st century. It's a debate that will likely continue for years to come.
But we still haven't really answered our main question. Why does Elon Musk still have security clearance? Is it national interest? Is it something else entirely?
It's hard to say definitively. Unfortunately, there's no simple answer. The government hasn't provided a clear explanation for its decision-making process.
Right.
So we can analyze the potential risks and benefits, speculate about political motivations, but ultimately we can only draw inferences from the available information.
So it's like we're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. But even without that piece, we can see that this case raises fundamental questions about accountability, fairness, and that balance between individual freedom and national security. So we've spent all this time talking about Elon Musk and security clearances. We've looked at the potential risks, the ethical concerns, and we've even talked about some historical examples. But we still keep coming back to that one question. Why does he still have it?
It's the question that just won't go away. We've looked at all the angles, considered the arguments.
Right.
But that definitive answer, it's still out there somewhere.
It's like there's this whole other layer of information, some kind of classified calculation that we're not seeing. Is it possible there are factors at play that we just don't know about?
It's definitely possible. I mean, we have to remember that we're only seeing part of the picture. The government has access to information that we don't. Intelligence reports, background checks, all sorts of things. So it's entirely possible that they know something that we don't.
So maybe there's some really compelling national security reason that justifies overlooking the potential risks with Musk. But even if that's true, doesn't it still raise those concerns about fairness and transparency?
Oh, absolutely. The lack of transparency just fuels speculation and erodes public trust. If it seems like certain people are exempt from the rules, it undermines the whole system.
It creates this feeling that there are two sets of rules. One for the elite, the innovators, the too-big-to-fail crowd, and then another set of rules for everyone else.
And that's a dangerous precedent. It makes people question the legitimacy of the whole security clearance process.
So where do we go from here? How do we balance the need for innovation and individual freedom with the need for national security? And how do we make sure the system is fair and transparent for everyone?
Those are the million-dollar questions. This whole deep dive into Elon Musk's security clearance, it's really highlighted some of the challenges we face in the 21st century, trying to balance individual actions, national interest, and all the new technology and innovation that's happening.
We've talked about the risks, the ethical dilemmas, and even looked back at some historical examples. And while we might not have all the answers, I think we have a better understanding of the issues now.
I think so too. And that's really the point of all this, isn't it? To learn more, to ask questions, and to have these tough conversations.
I think it's also important to remember that security clearance isn't just some bureaucratic process. It's about protecting our country and making sure the people who have access to sensitive information are trustworthy and reliable.
Absolutely. So as we move forward, we need to keep asking these questions, demand more transparency from our government, and make sure the system is fair and accountable for everyone.
Well, this has been a really interesting deep dive. I think we've all learned a lot, and hopefully it's made you think about some of these issues too.
I hope so.
We always encourage our listeners to keep exploring these topics, to ask questions, and to stay engaged in the conversation.
Because at the end of the day, that's how we make progress.
That's it for our deep dive today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.